Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here with the first video in my Games of the Decade series. Today we'll be discussing my number 3 game from the year 2010, Mass Effect 2. This sci-fi role-playing game is one that has been often imitated but never replicated. In Mass Effect 2, you resume the role of Commander Shepard as you recruit a highly trained team of specialists to take on an enemy force that threatens the human species throughout the universe. You'll take command of your own ship, the Normandy, as you travel a wide-ranging set of planets and solar systems, providing many hours of exploration and discovery. As Commander Shepard, your task is to find a full crew of specialists to aid you in a dangerous mission to seek out and destroy the threat of the Collectors, who are systematically wiping out human colonies all over the galaxy. The game design here is one of my favorite things about the game. Each of your recruited team members have their own set of missions and storylines, and fully completing each member's personal quest line will increase their loyalty to Commander Shepard, which in turn plays directly into how the final mission of the game turns out. Failure to build enough trust between you and your crew will result in dire consequences, whereas a loyal crew will stand a much better chance of success in the final outcome of the story. Completing each quest will take you across space in one of the most believably written universes in all of gaming, especially for a sci-fi setting. It's also fair to say that the group you're assembling in the game is one of the best cast of characters that you will find in any game for the entire decade. Surely everyone that plays the game will be able to connect with at least a few of the team members, and all of them remain quite memorable now, even almost 10 years later. In addition, the final boss fight of the game is an amazing spectacle against an overwhelming enemy, and is definitely one of my favorite final bosses that I've ever played. Combined with the buildup of the final fight and the amount of tension as you don't know whether or not your plan will ultimately be a success or a failure, Mass Effect 2 has undoubtedly one of the strongest final acts in all of gaming. The game also features a much improved combat system when compared to the first Mass Effect game, and echoes of Mass Effect 2's combats can still be seen in many games today. The ability to utilize the powers of your squad mates during battle is an additional wrinkle for those who plan ahead and take the appropriate teammates out on your various missions. One of the most influential aspects of Mass Effect 2, however, is of course the dialogue. Never before have I played a character who could truly be just as nasty in the dialogue instead of nobly heroic at every turn. Combined with the iconic Commander Shepard, the Paragon Renegade dialogue system, while not perfect, provided the inspiration for many other games to come in the following decade. Even all these years later, very few games have written better dialogue options than Mass Effect 2. The Mass Effect series itself is unique in that it tried to continue your particular story throughout the entire trilogy, and no, we will not be mentioning Andromeda in this video. While many were ultimately disappointed in the way Mass Effect 3 handled the final ending, during Mass Effect 2 we were still very much in the middle of an epic 3-part series that promised us that all of our choices would matter in the end, even though this largely failed in Mass Effect 3. Looking back now, the game feels like it's a bit antiquated in many ways, although the character and world are more than enough to show how truly impactful this game has been on future games. In many ways, Mass Effect 2 is the pinnacle of BioWare, and there's many games that have tried and failed to emulate it. Oh, but I should mention, the resource gathering is horrendous. It's horrendous. It's some of the worst I've ever played. But anyway, that is it for the summary portion of the video, and now I'm just going to do more of a freewheeling discussion about Mass Effect 2. Look, what can you say about Mass Effect 2? It's clearly one of the most influential RPG games of the entire decade. Everything that came after that, every sci-fi game that you see will be compared in some way to Mass Effect almost all the time. It'll be oh, this game is Mass Effect, but this, Mass Effect plus that, or some sort of conversation revolving around that. Everybody knows how influential Mass Effect has been. Also, any game you see with the dialogue wheel and all that, you see so many games try to copy that. That is specifically something that comes from the era of BioWare. They definitely are the ones who push that into the mainstream, and you see this more and more in gaming throughout the entire decade, and I'm sure we will see it more and refined as we head into the future. Games are always trying to copy this system. You see it all the time, and like I said earlier in the summary, you really don't see anyone come close to doing what they did back with these Mass Effect games in the early going. Now, obviously, some of the writing for BioWare has gone sharply downhill over the last few years. That's been widely documented. But here in Mass Effect 2, it's still quite sharp, and they still are on top of their game at this point. Like I said, this is really the pinnacle of BioWare for me, and this actually is going to be the only BioWare game that makes it onto my list for games of the decade. It's also going to be the only EA game, so you don't have to worry about seeing anything else from Electronic Arts on my list. This game here is the only game that is something that I deem to be among my favorite games of the decade. I love that you can play your Commander Shepard, whether you want to be a male or a female character. They're both fully voiced protagonists, but it doesn't matter how you want to play it. I prefer to play him as a renegade because he really can be a jerk in this game, and there's not really many games where they allow your protagonist who has voice to be an absolute jerk. But in this game, they definitely go out of their way. They have some great dialogue choices. It's very much more entertaining. For a game that relies so heavily on dialogue, it certainly keeps up the pace. It keeps the dialogue interesting. Even though, I mean, I know a lot of the later games have been made fun of a bit for some of the corny lines, and looking back, I've playing through this game to capture some footage, there still is some bad writing here. I think maybe it gets overstated sometimes how great the writing is, but it still is well written and certainly entertaining if you play a renegade Shepard especially. I really do enjoy that. And like I said in the summary, the characters in the game, especially some of the characters I like Garrus or Tally. I mean, some of these characters I still remember here almost 10 years later very fondly, and I really do enjoy the characters. And the ending of the game where you don't know if you're going to be successful or not, it really just is very impactful. I love the final boss fight. It is just... the first time I played it, sure, there's been some bigger spectacles since then, but the first time I played that game, I could not believe how great the final boss fight looked. It was just... it's this very intimidating presence. It takes up the entire front of your screen. You have the whole team in there trying to fight this thing off. It is just one of the most amazing final scenes that I've ever played, and it really has stuck with me. There certainly is no doubt Mass Effect 2, one of my favorite RPGs, especially for a sci-fi setting, that I played in the entire decade, and that is why it lands at number 3 on my list for 2010 in my games of the decade. So that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know what your top 3 games are of 2010. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel head forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11.